The night was dark and the wind howled like a wild animal. Rain poured down in sheets, turning the dirt roads into muddy rivers. In a small village nestled between dense forests and rolling hills, life came to a standstill. Everyone stayed indoors, huddled together waiting for the storm to pass. But not everyone had the luxury of safety or comfort. In one corner of the village, there lived a poor family of 5. They weren't rich by any means. In fact, they barely scraped by each day. Their wooden house leaned slightly to one side, its roof patched up with old tin sheets that rattled loudly whenever the wind picked up. Inside, the family sat around a flickering lantern, trying to keep warm. There was the mother, a kind woman who always put others before herself. The father, a hard-working man whose hands were rough from years of labor. Their teenage son, curious and protective, and 2 young daughters full of energy despite their humble surroundings. Even though they didn't have much, this family had something far more valuable: a big heart. Neighbors often spoke about how willing they were to help, even when they themselves were struggling. And tonight, as the storm raged outside, none of them expected their kindness would lead to an adventure they'd never forget. It was late, and the children were already tucked into bed. The parents sat quietly, listening to the rain hammer against the windows. Suddenly, a sharp knock broke through the noise of the storm. Startled, the mother stood up, her eyes wide. Who could be out at this hour? She hesitated for a moment, then walked cautiously toward the door. Her husband followed close behind, his hand gripping a heavy stick, just in case. When she opened the door, the sight made her gasp. 2 little girls stood on the doorstep, drenched to the bone. Their clothes clung to their tiny frames, and their faces were pale with fear. One of them trembled so badly that her teeth chattered uncontrollably. Both looked no older than 10. Without saying a word, they stared up at the couple, their wide eyes pleading for help. "Please," one of them finally whispered, her voice shaking. "We got lost. Can we come in?" The mother didn't hesitate. She stepped aside immediately, ushering the shivering girls inside. "Of course, come in quickly," she said, wrapping a blanket around their shoulders. The father closed the door firmly behind them, locking out the cold and the storm. Once inside, the girls collapsed onto the floor, their exhaustion evident. The family sprang into action. The mother hurried to prepare some hot tea while the father lit another lantern to brighten the room. The teenage son fetched dry clothes from a trunk, and the younger daughters brought over extra blankets. Within minutes, the girls were wrapped in warmth, sipping tea and beginning to relax. As the initial shock wore off, the family tried to learn more about their unexpected guests. "Where are you from?" the father asked gently. "Do your parents know you're out here?" The girls exchanged a glance, their expressions uneasy. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the older one shrugged and said softly, We don't know where we are. We were with a group earlier, but the storm came suddenly and we got separated." Her answer raised more questions than it answered, but the family decided not to push too hard. After all, the girls were clearly traumatized, soaked to the skin, and probably scared out of their wits. Whatever had happened to them, it could wait until morning. For now, their priority was making sure the girls felt safe and cared for. The youngest daughter of the family, barely 6 years old, crawled over to sit beside the visitors. With innocent curiosity, she held out a piece of bread. "Are you hungry?" she asked sweetly. The older girl hesitated, then smiled faintly and accepted the offering. It was a small gesture, but it seemed to ease some of the tension in the room. As the clock ticked past midnight, the storm showed no signs of letting up. Outside, the world felt hostile and unforgiving, but inside the modest home, warmth and compassion filled the air. The family shared what little food they had, telling stories to distract the girls from their fears. Slowly, the 2 visitors began to open up, laughing shyly at jokes and joining in the conversation. Despite their gratitude, however, something about the girls lingered in the back of the family's minds. They were polite and well-spoken, yet there was an air of mystery about them. Why were they traveling alone? Where exactly had they come from? And why did they seem reluctant to share details? For now, though, those questions remained unanswered. The family pushed their doubts aside, focusing instead on the immediate task of keeping everyone safe and comfortable. Little did they know this simple act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change their lives forever. As the storm continued to rage outside, the family drifted off to sleep, unaware of the secrets hidden beneath their roof. What lay ahead was something none of them could have imagined, a story of courage, danger, and revelations that would leave the entire village talking for years to come. The storm outside showed no signs of letting up. Day turned into night, and the family's small house remained a refuge from the chaos beyond. The two girls, though still quiet, seemed to settle in more comfortably as time passed. They ate the food offered to them, shared stories about their favorite games, and even laughed along with the younger daughters of the household. But despite these moments of normalcy, something felt off. It wasn't one big thing. It was a collection of little things that added up over time. For instance, the older daughter noticed early on that the girls were unusually careful with their belongings. One morning, she saw Isabella tucking a small backpack under her bed, checking twice to make sure it was hidden properly. When asked what was inside, Isabella simply smiled and said, "Just some keepsakes." That answer might have been enough for most people, but the family couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. The bag didn't look like it belonged to ordinary children. It was sleek, expensive-looking, and completely out of place in their modest home. Yet they decided not to pry too much. After all, the girls had been through a lot, and asking too many questions might scare them. But then came other strange occurrences. Objects started disappearing around the house, things like spoons, a candlestick, and even a pair of scissors. At first, everyone assumed it was just misplaced or forgotten, but when the items reappeared later in odd places, like finding the missing spoon tucked behind a curtain, suspicions grew. No one wanted to accuse the girls outright, but whispers began among the family members during quiet moments. One evening, after dinner, the teenage son stayed awake longer than usual. He sat near the dim lantern, pretending to sharpen his knife while keeping an ear out for anything unusual. His instincts told him something wasn't right, and he trusted those instincts. Sure enough, just as he was about to give up and go to bed, he heard faint voices coming from the room where the girls slept. Curious, he tiptoed closer, careful not to make a sound. Through the crack in the door, he could see Isabella and Camilla sitting cross-legged on the floor, speaking in hushed tones. Their backs were turned to him, so they didn't notice his presence. What caught his attention, though, was the seriousness in their voices. These weren't playful giggles or casual chatter. They sounded tense, almost scared. "Do you think they know?" Isabella whispered urgently. "I don't know," Camilla replied, glancing toward the door nervously. "They seem nice, but we can't take any chances." The boy froze, his heart pounding. Who were they talking about? And what exactly did they think the family might know? Before he could hear more, the floorboard beneath his foot creaked slightly. Instantly, the girl stopped talking and turned toward the door. Realizing he'd been caught eavesdropping, the teenager quickly retreated to his own corner of the house, pretending to be asleep when they peeked outside. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house shifted subtly. The girls acted as if nothing had happened, smiling politely and helping with chores. But the family couldn't ignore what they now suspected, that Isabella and Camilla were hiding something significant. Still, they chose not to confront them directly. Instead, they kept a closer eye on their guests, hoping to piece together the truth without causing panic. As the days dragged on, another incident raised eyebrows. Late one night, the mother woke up to find the front door slightly ajar. Thinking one of the kids had accidentally left it open, she went to close it. That's when she noticed fresh footprints in the mud leading away from the house. Her stomach sank. Had someone snuck out? Or worse, had someone been watching them? She woke her husband immediately, and together they inspected the area. There were no signs of forced entry, which meant whoever or whatever had made those prints must have come willingly. The couple exchanged worried glances but decided not to alarm the rest of the family just yet. They locked the door tightly and returned to bed, though neither slept well that night. By now, rumors were spreading throughout the village. People talked about wealthy tourists who had gone missing before the storm hit. Some claimed to have seen suspicious vehicles parked near the forest edge. Others speculated about ransom demands and kidnappings. While the family tried to dismiss these stories as gossip, they couldn't help but wonder if there was some connection to the girls staying under their roof. The father wrestled with his thoughts. On one hand, he wanted to believe that Isabella and Camilla were simply lost children trying to survive. On the other hand, the strange behavior, the mysterious bag, the whispered conversations, all of it pointed to something bigger, something dangerous. Was it possible that these girls weren't who they claimed to be? And if they weren't, what did that mean for the family? Despite their growing unease, the family continued to care for the girls. They cooked meals, shared stories, and treated them like part of the household. Deep down, they hoped their kindness would encourage the girls to open up eventually, but every passing day brought new mysteries, making it harder to ignore the nagging feeling that they were caught up in something far beyond their understanding. One afternoon, the younger daughters found themselves playing a game of hide-and-seek with Isabella and Camilla. As they laughed and ran around the house, one of the girls accidentally bumped into a table, knocking over a vase. Everyone froze, expecting the worst. But instead of scolding them, Camilla bent down to pick up the pieces. Her hands trembling slightly, she muttered something under her breath, a phrase none of them understood. "What did you say?" The youngest daughter asked innocently. Camilla blushed and shook her head. "Nothing important," she said quickly, avoiding eye contact. But the damage was done. The family exchanged knowing looks. Whatever secret the girls were keeping, it was clear they weren't ready to share it. As the storm finally began to weaken, the tension inside the house reached its peak. The family knew they couldn't keep living in uncertainty. Something had to give, and soon. Little did they realize the truth was closer than they thought, waiting to explode into their lives like lightning splitting the sky. What followed would test their courage, challenge their beliefs, and force them to confront a reality they never could have imagined. The storm may have passed, but the real tempest was only beginning. The storm had finally begun to ease, but the tension inside the house only grew thicker. The family tried their best to act normal, going about their daily routines as if nothing unusual was happening. Yet, every creak of the floorboards, every whispered conversation between the girls, and every unexplained event made them more uneasy. It felt like living under a dark cloud that refused to lift. One evening, after another long day of chores and attempts to keep things lighthearted, the mother found herself alone in the kitchen. She busied herself cleaning up after dinner, her hands moving mechanically as her mind raced with unanswered questions. That's when she overheard it, a snippet of conversation drifting through the thin walls of the house. At first, she thought it was just the usual chatter between Isabella and Camilla, but then something caught her attention. Words like guards, ransom, and escape floated into her ears. Her heart skipped a beat. She froze, gripping the edge of the counter tightly, straining to listen without making a sound. "You think they'll find us here?" one of the girls asked in a hushed tone. "I don't know," the other replied nervously. "We can't stay forever. They're looking for us." The mother's mind spun. Who were they? And why would anyone be looking for these two girls? Her instincts screamed at her to confront them right then and there, but she forced herself to stay calm. Instead, she quietly finished tidying up and walked back to the main room, pretending she hadn't heard anything. Later that night, unable to sleep, the teenage son decided to investigate further. He couldn't shake the feeling that something big was being hidden from them. Carefully avoiding the squeaky floorboards, he crept toward the room where the girls were sleeping. Through the dim light of the lantern flickering in the hallway, he peered inside. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. One of the girls, Isabella, was sitting upright on the bed, clutching something in her hands. As she shifted slightly, the glint of metal caught his eye. Curiosity got the better of him, and he stepped closer. careful not to make a sound. Then he saw it clearly, an ornate necklace resting in her palm. It sparkled even in the low light, its diamonds catching the faint glow of the lantern. His jaw dropped. This wasn't just any piece of jewelry. It looked expensive, far beyond anything anyone in their village could afford. How did two lost girls end up with something so valuable? His mind raced with possibilities. Were they thieves? Or was there something else going on? The next morning, the son waited until everyone was gathered around the breakfast table before bringing up what he'd seen. Trying to sound casual, he turned to Isabella and said, "Hey, I noticed you have a really pretty necklace. Where did you get it?" For a moment, silence fell over the room. Isabella froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Camilla's eyes widened, and she glanced nervously at her companion. The family watched intently, waiting for an explanation. Finally, Isabella set her fork down and sighed deeply. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at the family seated around her. I'm sorry," she stammered. "We didn't want to lie to you. We just didn't know who to trust." The mother leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "What do you mean? You can tell us. Whatever it is, we'll help. You." After a long pause, Isabella took a deep breath and began to speak. "We're not regular kids," she admitted slowly. "Our family is, well, we're rich. Really rich. A few days ago, some bad people came to our house. They took us away and said they wanted money from our parents. We managed to escape during the storm, but we've been running ever since." The room went silent. No one moved or spoke for several seconds. The family stared at each other, processing what they'd just heard. Rich, kidnapped, ransom demands? It sounded like something out of a movie, not real life. The father broke the silence first. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" he asked gently. "We could have helped you." Camilla wiped her tears and shook her head. "We were scared. What if you turned us into those people? Or worse, what if you didn't believe us? We didn't know what to do." The mother reached across the table and placed a reassuring hand on Isabella's arm. "You're safe here," she said firmly. "No matter who you are or where you come from, we'll protect you, that's a promise." Relief washed over the girls' faces. For the first time since arriving, they seemed to relax a little. They explained more details about their ordeal, the terrifying night they were taken from their home, the days spent locked in a remote cabin, and the risky escape during the chaos of the storm. They had wandered aimlessly until they stumbled upon the family's house, desperate for shelter. As the story unfolded, the family listened with growing concern. These weren't ordinary children. They were survivors, thrust into a dangerous world they weren't prepared for. And now, they were relying on strangers to keep them safe. But the revelation also brought new fears. If kidnappers were involved, how long would it take for them to track the girls down? Would the family be putting themselves in danger by helping them? These thoughts weighed heavily on everyone's minds, but no one voiced them aloud. Instead, they focused on what mattered, most keeping the girls safe. That afternoon, the father called a family meeting. Sitting together in the main room, they discussed their options. "We need to figure out what to do next," he said seriously. "This isn't just about us anymore. Those men might still be looking for them." The teenage son nodded. "We should contact the authorities," he suggested. "They'll know how to handle this." "But how?" the mother countered. "The storm has flooded the roads and the nearest police station is miles away. It's too risky to travel right now." "We can't just sit here and wait either," the son argued. "If those men find us, we won't stand a chance." The debate continued, with everyone weighing in. In the end, they agreed on a plan. They would fortify the house as best they could, using whatever materials they had available. The son volunteered to set traps outside, simple but effective ones designed to slow down intruders. Meanwhile, the parents would try to send a message, for help using an old radio transmitter they kept for emergencies. As they worked together, the girls stayed close, watching silently. They offered to help whenever they could, rolling bandages, gathering supplies, and even suggesting ideas for securing the windows. Seeing their determination filled the family with a renewed sense of purpose. Despite everything, they were all in this together. By nightfall, the house was as secure as it could be. Lanterns burned brightly in every corner, casting shadows that danced eerily on the walls. Outside, the wind picked up again, rustling the trees and sending chills down everyone's spines. The storm may have weakened, but the threat looming over them felt stronger than ever. As they settled in for the night, the family took turns keeping watch. Each member carried a weapon: sticks, knives, anything they could use to defend themselves if needed. Though fear lingered in the air, there was also a sense of unity. They had faced hardships before, but this was different. This time they weren't just fighting for themselves, they were fighting for two young lives that depended on them. Little did they know, the worst was yet to come. Somewhere out there, unseen eyes were watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when they did, the family would be forced to dig deeper than ever before, tapping into reserves of courage they never knew they had. But for now, they held on to hope. Hope that they could protect the girls. Hope that help would arrive in time. And hope that, somehow, they'd make it through this nightmare intact. The family's makeshift preparations had turned their humble home into a fortress of sorts. Every window was barricaded with wooden planks, every door reinforced with whatever they could find. The teenage son had rigged up alarms using tin cans and string, creating a network of early warning systems around the perimeter of the house. It wasn't much, but it gave them some peace of mind, or at least as much as they could muster under the circumstances. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. No one spoke much, each lost in their own thoughts. The girls clung to each other, their wide eyes darting toward every sound that broke the silence. The mother tried her best to keep them calm, telling stories from her childhood or humming lullabies to distract them. But even she couldn't hide the worry etched on her face. The father paced back and forth, his hands gripping a heavy stick tightly. He kept glancing out the cracks in the shutters, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. Despite their efforts, the feeling of being watched grew stronger with each passing hour. Shadows seemed to stretch longer than usual, and the wind carried whispers that didn't belong to nature. One night, just as everyone thought they might finally get some rest, the youngest daughter let out a startled cry. She pointed toward the window, where footprints had appeared in the mud outside, fresh ones, not made by rainwater trickling down the hill. Everyone froze. The father rushed to the window, peeking cautiously through a gap in the boards. His heart sank when he saw figures moving in the distance, barely visible under the pale moonlight. Strangers, armed and deliberate in their steps, were closing in on the house. Panic threatened to take over, but the father clenched his jaw and forced himself to stay composed. Now wasn't the time to lose control. "We need to act fast," he whispered urgently, turning to the others. "They're here." The family sprang into action. The mother ushered the girls into a hidden crawlspace beneath the floorboards, a cramped, dusty space that had once been used for storing potatoes. She handed them a flashlight and whispered reassurances before closing the trapdoor above them. "Stay quiet," she said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. "No matter what happens, don't come out until we tell you." Meanwhile, the teenage son checked the traps he'd set earlier, making sure they were still intact. He grabbed a knife and stationed himself near the front door, ready to defend the house if necessary. The younger daughters huddled together, in a corner, clutching blankets around them like shields. Though scared, they tried to remain brave, knowing their parents needed them to stay strong. Outside, the strangers moved closer, their boots crunching against the gravel path leading to the house. The family held their breath, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. Then, without warning, the first intruder tripped one of the boys' traps, a tripwire tied to a bucket filled with rocks. The loud crash echoed through the night, startling the men and alerting the family to their exact position. "Over there," one of the strangers shouted, pointing toward the source of the noise. They regrouped quickly, drawing weapons and advancing toward the house. The father tightened his grip on the stick and stepped forward, blocking the doorway. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steady, despite the fear coursing through him. "What do you want?" One of the men sneered, stepping into the dim light cast by the lanterns inside. "You know exactly what we want," he growled. "Hand over the girls and no one gets hurt." The father's stomach churned. So, these men knew about the girls, which meant they'd been tracked somehow, their location discovered. Betrayal flickered in his mind, but he pushed the thought aside. There was no time for anger now. All that mattered was keeping the girls safe. "You won't touch them," the father replied, planting his feet firmly on the ground. "Leave this place or you'll regret it." The man laughed coldly, gesturing for his companions to spread out. "You really think you can stop us? Look at you, just a poor farmer and his family. What chance do you have?" But the family wasn't backing down. The teenage son emerged from the shadows, holding his knife aloft. "Try us," he spat, his voice shaking but defiant. Behind him, the mother stood tall, her arms crossed over her chest. Even the younger daughters peered out from their corner, their small faces filled with determination. For a moment, the intruders hesitated. Maybe they hadn't expected resistance. Or maybe they underestimated the power of desperation. Whatever the reason, it gave the family precious seconds to prepare. Suddenly, another alarm went off, a tin can clattering to the ground as someone triggered another trap near the side of the house. The distraction worked. Two of the men ran to investigate, leaving only one guarding the front. Seizing the opportunity, the father lunged forward, swinging his stick with all his might. It connected solidly with the man's arm, causing him to drop his weapon with a yelp of pain. Chaos erupted. The remaining intruders scrambled to regroup, shouting orders and firing shots into the air to intimidate the family. Bullets whizzed past, embedding themselves in the walls and shattering windows. The mother screamed for everyone to take cover, pulling the younger children behind an overturned table. The teenage son ducked low, throwing anything he could find, pots, pans, stones at the attackers to keep them at bay. It felt like hours passed, though it was likely only minutes. Just when it seemed like the family might be overwhelmed, a distant sound pierced the night, a siren wailing faintly in the distance. The intruders froze, exchanging panicked looks. "They're coming!" one of them hissed. "We need to go now!" Without another word, they retreated, disappearing into the darkness as quickly as they'd arrived. The family stayed crouched, where they were, listening to the fading footsteps and the growing roar of engines approaching from afar. When the sirens grew louder, the father finally dared to step outside, waving frantically at the headlights cutting through the foggy night. A convoy of police vehicles skidded to a halt in front of the house, officers spilling out with guns drawn. Relief washed over the family like a tidal wave. "How did you know to come?" the father asked, his voice hoarse from shouting. The officers held up a small device, a radio transmitter. "Your son sent a message earlier," he explained. "We've been tracking your location since then. Are you all okay?" The father nodded, tears streaming down his face. "We're alive," he said simply, "thanks to you." As the officers secured the area and began searching for the fleeing kidnappers, the mother hurried to the crawl space and lifted the trap door. The two girls climbed out, trembling but unharmed. They hugged her tightly, sobbing with relief. For the first time in days, they allowed themselves to believe they were truly safe. But the ordeal wasn't over yet. As the authorities questioned the family and gathered evidence, it became clear that this wasn't just a random kidnapping. It was part of a larger operation targeting wealthy families. And while the immediate danger had passed, the scars left behind would take time to heal. Still, amidst the chaos and fear, one thing remained certain. The bond between the family and the girls had grown stronger. Through shared sacrifice and unwavering courage, they had faced unimaginable odds and emerged victorious. Little did they know, the story of their bravery would soon spread far beyond the confines of their small village, inspiring countless others to stand up in the face of adversity. For now, though, they simply held on to each other, grateful for the gift of survival and the promise of brighter days ahead. The arrival of the police had been a relief, but it didn't mean the danger was completely gone. The family stood outside their battered home, watching as officers combed through the muddy ground for clues. Flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating broken branches and footprints left behind by the fleeing kidnappers. It felt surreal. Just hours ago, they were fighting for their lives, and now, uniformed strangers were taking charge. But betrayal lingered in the air like a foul smell. As the adrenaline faded, questions began to surface. How had the kidnappers found them? Who had tipped them off? The family hadn't told anyone about the girls' true identity, not even their closest neighbors. So how did word get out? The teenage son was the first to voice his suspicions. Someone must have talked, he muttered bitterly, kicking at a rock on the ground. His father shot him a warning glance, but deep down, everyone knew he was right. Someone in the village had betrayed them. The mother tried to stay optimistic. "Let's not jump to conclusions," she said softly, though her own voice wavered with doubt. "Maybe they followed us somehow, or maybe they guessed." "No," the boy interrupted firmly. "They knew exactly where to find us. This wasn't a guess, it was information." The weight of his words hung heavy over the group. For days, the family had risked everything to protect the two girls. They had shared their food, sacrificed their safety, and faced armed men without hesitation, all because they believed it was the right thing to do. And now, someone had thrown that trust back in their faces. As dawn broke, the officers finished, securing the area and assured the family they'd be safe for now. One of them approached the father holding a notepad. "We need to ask you a few more questions," he said, "about the girls, about what happened here tonight. Everything you can remember." The father nodded wearily and motioned for the officer to follow him inside. The rest of the family trailed behind, still shaken but determined to cooperate. Sitting around the battered table, they recounted the events leading up to the attack. The strange behavior of the girls, the whispered conversations, the mysterious necklace, and finally, the confrontation with the kidnappers. When they mentioned the necklace, one of the officers raised an eyebrow. "Do you still have it?" he asked. Isabella, who had been sitting quietly beside Camilla, reached into her pocket and pulled out the glittering piece of jewelry. She placed it gently on the table, her hands trembling slightly. The officer picked it up, examining it closely under the light. His expression shifted from curiosity to shock. "This is worth a fortune," he murmured. "Where did you say you got this?" "I didn't say," Isabella replied softly, glancing at the family. "It belonged to my mom. I took it when they grabbed us." The officer exchanged a look with his partner before turning back to the family. "This confirms it," he said gravely. "You've been sheltering the daughters of one of the wealthiest families in the country. Their parents have been frantic, offering massive rewards for their safe return. These kidnappers weren't amateurs. They're part of a well-organized gang that targets high-profile individuals." The room fell silent. The family stared at each other, processing the magnitude of what they'd just heard. Wealthy didn't begin to describe it. The kind of money involved here was beyond anything they could imagine. Suddenly, the stakes felt even higher. After the officers left to continue their investigation, the family gathered in the main room to talk. Exhaustion lined their faces, but sleep seemed impossible. Too much had happened and too many emotions churned inside them. "We need to leave," the teenage son said suddenly, breaking the silence. Everyone turned to look at him. "If those men come back, and they might, we won't survive another attack. We don't have weapons or training. We got lucky tonight, but luck doesn't last forever." His words stung, but no one argued. He was right. Staying put wasn't an option anymore, but leaving meant abandoning their home, the only place they'd ever known. Where would they go? What would they do? The father rubbed his temples, thinking hard. "There's an old cabin deeper in the woods," he said slowly. "It belonged to my grandfather. No one uses it anymore, and it's far enough away that they wouldn't think to look there." "It's risky," the mother countered. "What if they track us again?" "We'll take precautions," the son insisted. "Change routes, cover. Our tracks move at night. Anything to throw them off." Reluctantly, the family agreed. They packed only the essentials: clothes, food, water, and a few personal items. The girls clung to their backpacks tightly, refusing to let them out of sight. Before leaving, the mother knelt down and hugged her younger daughters. "Stay close to me, okay?" she whispered. "No matter what happens, don't wander off," as though they stepped outside. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It should have been beautiful, but instead it felt ominous. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bird call made them flinch. Paranoia gripped them like a vice. The journey to the cabin was grueling. The path was steep and uneven, forcing them to climb over fallen trees and navigate thick underbrush. The girls stumbled often, their city shoes no match for the rugged terrain. Each time the mother or father would lift them up, urging them to keep going. By midday they were all drenched in sweat, their legs aching and lungs burning. When they finally reached the cabin, it was nothing more than a crumbling wooden structure surrounded by moss-covered trees. Inside, dust coated every surface, and cobwebs hung from the rafters. But it was shelter, and for now, that was enough. While the others settled in, the teenage son volunteered to scout the area. He moved silently, checking for signs of pursuit. When he returned, his face was grim. "I saw tracks," he admitted. "Fresh ones. They're still looking for us." Fear rippled through the group, but the father held up a hand. "We'll hold them off," he said firmly. "We've done it before and we'll do it again. Together." Inspired by his determination, the family worked quickly to fortify the cabin, using whatever materials they could find: branches, stones, scraps of metal. They created barriers around the windows and doors. The son set new traps, this time more elaborate, designed to slow down anyone who dared approach. Night fell quickly, cloaking the forest in darkness. The family huddled together inside, listening intently for any sound that might signal danger. Outside, the wind howled mournfully, rattling the loose boards of the cabin. Tension coiled in the air, thick and suffocating. Suddenly, one of the traps triggered, a loud snap followed by a muffled curse. The intruders had arrived. Panic surged, but the family fought it down. They couldn't afford to lose control now. Grabbing whatever makeshift weapons they had, they prepared to defend themselves once more. The teenage son positioned himself, near the door, knife in hand. The father stood beside him, gripping a sturdy branch. Even the mother and younger daughters readied themselves, holding sharp sticks and rocks. Then, without warning, the door burst open. Shadows poured in, silhouetted against the dim light of the moon. The family braced for impact, hearts pounding wildly. But before the fight could escalate, a voice rang out, loud and commanding. "Stop! Police!" Flashlights blinded everyone, as officers stormed in, guns drawn. Behind them stood two figures dressed in expensive suits, their faces pale with worry and relief. It was the girl's parents. For a moment, no one moved. Then, with a cry, Isabella and Camilla ran forward, throwing themselves into their parents' arms. Tears streamed down their faces as they clung to each other, overwhelmed by emotion. The officers quickly subdued the remaining intruders, cuffing them and dragging them away. As the chaos subsided, the girls' parents turned to the family who had saved their daughters. Their eyes were filled with gratitude and something else: respect. "You've done something extraordinary," the father of the girl said, his voice choked with emotion. "We will never forget this. Never." And as the family stood there, bruised and battered but alive, they realized something profound. In protecting these two girls, they had discovered a strength within themselves they never knew existed. They had faced betrayal, fear, and danger head-on, and emerged victorious. But the story wasn't over yet. What came next would change their lives in ways they couldn't possibly predict. The reunion between the girls and their parents was a scene straight out of a dream. Tears flowed freely as hugs turned into laughter, then back to tears again. It was clear that these two families, one wealthy beyond measure, the other struggling, just to survive, were bound together by something far stronger than money or status. They were united by courage, sacrifice, and an unspoken understanding of what it meant to fight for someone you love. As dawn broke over the cabin, the officers finished securing the area and rounding up the kidnappers. The family who had risked everything stood silently, watching as the scene unfolded. Exhaustion weighed heavily on them, but there was also a sense of relief, a quiet knowing that they had done something truly remarkable. The girls' parents approached the family with gratitude written all over their faces. "We don't even know how to begin thanking you," the father said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved our daughters when no one else could. You gave them shelter, protected them, and kept them safe. We owe you everything." The mother of the family shook her head gently, her own eyes glistening with tears. "We didn't do it for thanks," she replied softly. "We did it because it was the right thing to do. Any decent person would have done the same." Her words struck a chord, not just with the girls' parents, but with everyone present. In a world where greed and selfishness often seemed to rule, this humble family had shown what true humanity looked like. Their actions spoke louder than any wealth or title ever could. But life doesn't always reward kindness without asking for change in return. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the girls' parents invited the family to come with them, to leave behind their modest home and join them at their estate until things settled down. At first, the family hesitated. They weren't used to luxury or grandeur, and the idea of accepting help felt foreign, almost uncomfortable. "We can't impose on you like that," the father said firmly. "We're simple people. We'll be fine here once things calm down." The girl's mother placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Please," she insisted, "this isn't about charity. It's about family. You've become part of ours now. Let us take care of you, if only for a little while." After some discussion, the family finally agreed. They packed what few belongings they had left and climbed into one of the sleek cars waiting outside the cabin. As they drove away from the forest, leaving behind the wreckage of their old life, none of them knew exactly what lay ahead. But one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same. Arriving at the estate was like stepping into another world. Towering gates opened onto sprawling lawns, manicured gardens stretched as far as the eye could see, and a mansion loomed in the distance, its windows gleaming in the sunlight. For the first time in their lives, the family felt completely out of place. Everything around them screamed opulence, yet they couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of it all. The girls' parents wasted no time making them feel welcome. Rooms were prepared, meals were served, and doctors were brought in to check on everyone's health. The younger daughters giggled as they explored the house, running through hallways and peeking into rooms filled with treasures they'd only seen in books. Even the teenage son found himself drawn to the library, where shelves upon shelves of books promised endless adventures. Yet despite the comfort and safety, the family struggled with guilt. Accepting such generosity felt wrong somehow, especially when they thought about their neighbors back in the village, people who worked hard every day just to scrape by. How could they enjoy all this while others continued to suffer? One evening, as they sat together in the grand dining room, the father voiced his concerns. "I appreciate everything you've done for us," he began cautiously, addressing the girls' parents. "But we can't stay here forever. And honestly, I'm not sure we belong in a place like this." To his surprise, the girl's father nodded in agreement. "I understand your hesitation," he said, "but let me ask you something. What if you could use this opportunity to make a difference? Not just for yourselves, but for others?" The family exchanged confused glances. What did he mean? Before they could ask, he explained further. "Your bravery has inspired me, and my wife, to give back to communities like yours. We want to invest in your village, build schools, create jobs, and provide resources so that no one has to struggle the way you did. But we need your help to make it happen." A wave of realization washed over the family. This wasn't just about rewarding them for their heroism. It was about creating lasting change. Slowly, smiles spread across their faces. For the first time since the ordeal began, they felt hope, not just for themselves, but for everyone they cared about. Over the following weeks, plans were put into motion. The family worked closely with the girls' parents to identify the needs of their community. New wells were dug to ensure clean water, roads were repaired, and a schoolhouse was built where children could learn without traveling miles each day. Word spread quickly, and soon the entire village buzzed with excitement. Neighbors who had once dismissed the family as ordinary, even insignificant, now looked at them with admiration. "If it weren't for you, none of this would have happened," one villager said during a celebration held in their honor. "You may not realize it, but you've changed all our lives." The family humbly accepted the praise, though they knew the real credit belonged to the girls' parents. Still, they couldn't deny the role they had played in bringing everyone together. By opening their hearts and home to two strangers, they had sparked a chain reaction of kindness that rippled far beyond what they could have imagined. As months passed, the family eventually returned to their village, but not to the same life they had left behind. With the support of the girls' parents, they moved into a newly built house near the center of town, where they became leaders in their community. The teenage son pursued his education, inspired by the books he'd discovered in the mansion's library. The younger daughters thrived in the new school, dreaming of futures they once thought impossible, and the girls? They stayed in touch, visiting whenever they could. Though their worlds were vastly different, the bond they shared remained unbreakable. To the family, Isabella and Camila weren't just the daughters of wealthy parents. They were reminders of the power of compassion and the extraordinary impact of doing the right thing, no matter the cost. In the end, the storm that had brought chaos and fear also brought something unexpected: redemption. Not just for the family, but for everyone whose lives they touched. Their story became a legend in the village, a tale told to remind future generations that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness lead to the greatest transformations. And so, life went on. Broken roofs were repaired, muddy paths turned into paved roads, and laughter echoed through homes that had once known only silence. Through it all, the family carried with them the lessons they had learned: that true wealth lies not in material possessions, but in the connections we forge and the lives we uplift along the way. For them, the storm had been more than just a trial. It had been a turning point, a moment when they chose courage over fear, selflessness over survival, and love over indifference. And in doing so, they proved that even in the darkest of times, light can shine brightest when we least expect it.